I'm here with Patrick Combs. Patrick has shared his stories and strategies with millions of people around the globe for 30 years. He is a top-rated, widely known motivational speaker and thought leader on passion, possibility, and heart-based business. Patrick has spoken for almost 2,000 organizations and applied his talents everywhere, from talks at Stanford and Hilton, performances at the HBO Comedy Festival, to helping build a school in Kenya and coaching prisoners at the Donovan Correctional Institute. Add to the fact that he's a Hall of Fame speaker and comedic smash hit one-man theater performer and a 5-time author with more than 150,000 copies of his book sold. And I'm honored that Patrick is here to speak with us in the first place. Patrick, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. The bios read back to me sound ridiculous. They just sound ridiculous.
Well, Patrick, there's something in this bio I want to delve into. What is a heart-based business?
Oh, I'm intensely interested when I talk to corporations about answering that question. What is a heart-based business? But that's because I would love to see customer care done from the true point of view of love. But you have to be able to define that in business terms. So I do a keynote on love-based business or heart-based business. You can't call it love-based business and go far in the keynote world. But I would just say that I was able to present that, for example, for Hilton and Embassy Suites. And I remember a significant line in my research that I got to share with the executives, Iain, and it was this. Speaking to a leader of a self-proclaimed heart-based business in the hospitality industry of 30 years, he said, heart is very difficult to describe. It's like eating soup with a fork, but you know it when you hear it.
Is that your term, heart-based business?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't claim it or anything, but I used it when I was asked to do a keynote for them. Actually, it came from them. The development of that keynote was inspired because Embassy Suites called and said, we would love you to do a keynote for us for all of our general managers and sales executives on what we call heart. And so I got just so excited. I'm like, oh my God, they want me to talk about love. And then they taught me what heart meant to them. Heart, it's this phenomenal acronym for doing customer care. When someone has a complaint, hear, empathize, apologize, repair, and thank. So I took that as my launching point, and I developed a keynote that started there, because you got to meet your audience where they're at, deepen that concept, and then land in love. End the keynote by my opinion on just pure love.
That specific keynote, you said hear, empathize, apologize, repair, and thank. Have you found that translates one-to-one across cultures and continents? Or do you have to sub out one of those words?
I haven't done that keynote anywhere except in the United States. So I don't know. What a great question. Boy, you think like a speaker.
When you say I think like a speaker, what does that mean? How should a speaker think?
Well, you clearly went, what happens if you change up the audience? Is that still relevant? So I think one way that a speaker thinks is, it's not just about what I want to say. It's about how do I say what I want to say in a way that is beneficial to the audience that they will receive. So it's very audience-centric at the same time, right?
Right. Is that understanding something that you had from the jump, or is it something you had to figure out early on in your career?
I've had to learn it as I go. I had to learn it as I go, for sure. I made a great choice at 26 years old, and one that is just a choice powered by grace. I can't make any claim to being so smart as to do it. But at 26, I said, who can I speak to? Who do I want to speak to? What do I want to speak about? And when I coach upcoming speakers, I say the most important choice you will make is get your choice of topic right. Because if you choose correctly and it's coming from this deeply experienced, authentic, passionate place in yourself, that keynote can power a career for 10 years easily. And you'll be unassailable on stage because you're standing on your dime. However, I see most speakers, at least those that are beginners or trying to become excellent at what they do, most speakers to me look like they're anywhere between 1 to 10 degrees off of their true north, what they should really be talking about. And so I see them standing in intellectual space or at aspirational space. And to me, it screams, yeah, you're not really talking from your power center.
What does the word power center, the term power center, mean?
I don't know. I just said it for the first time.
I like it.
But it definitely means I'm in my power as a communicator anywhere, whether I'm on a stage or not. If I'm speaking at the intersection of my passion with my life experience, because that's all the credibility I ever need to talk, is I've lived this experience. So I'll share my truth and I'm passionate about it. Combined with one other key element, I understand who I'm talking to and I care about who I'm talking to. And so that takes you out of the category of a pontificator and puts you hopefully into the category of a connector and a communicator and a helper and a benefiter.
What was the first?
So to me, one of the key aspects of speaking is understand your audience. Work to understand your audience until you feel like you have this eureka moment. I always have a eureka when I'm doing audience analysis before a keynote, where I go from, I think I understand what they do, to eureka. Oh my gosh, I get it. I get what it's like to be them. And then I feel ready to talk.
What was the first time you felt like you had a story that could create that eureka moment for you?
It's not a story that creates that eureka moment. It's research into the audience that creates that eureka moment.
The sort of research that you did prior to getting those eureka moments versus the kind of research you do now. What's an understanding you have now that you didn't earlier on in your career?
I didn't have to research my audience when I started my career because I made a fantastic choice by grace. And it was, I want to speak to college students because I'm barely out of college. I'm just 4 years out of college. I understand these people completely. But then when I started to stretch into corporate speaking, where I didn't have any experience working in a corporation or being a director of sales or anything, I had to do research into what is it like to have their job? What are their metrics? What are they measured by? What are their successes? What's their daily modus operandi? What are their jargon and their terms? What keeps them awake at night? And who's killing it among them? And why is that person killing it among them? And the day that I arrived, so I asked a lot of questions of the person who's bringing me in. And I interview several people inside the company in different positions that will be sitting in my audience. And it doesn't take long before I have a moment where you'll suddenly, if you're doing this kind of work, you'll suddenly feel as if, oh, if I worked there, I would do these 3 things differently and I would rise. And that's when I know I'm ready to speak, because I can talk to anybody in that audience before the keynote and I can kind of describe their job and their stressors and their aspirations and their daily modus operandi. But what I'm sitting on is 1 to 3 strategies that I know I personally would employ to great benefit.
A lot of this research, this audience analysis, finding their pain points, finding what makes them tick, makes a lot of sense to me. I'm curious how you've applied your theater experience. You've done that one-man show to the rest of it. I understand that in theater, there's also the audience. You're also putting on a show. But what is something that you get because of that one-man show that you think some other corporate speakers might not get?
Many things. So I'm trying to go fast, okay? It really schooled me. It made keynote speaking look like falling off a log and doing a one-person show like juggling 5 chainsaws on fire. So, but the number one thing that I pulled over is the permission to tell stories with the freedom to be more entertaining. Because in the theater show, the story is just for entertainment. And because it's a theater, you're allowed to stretch into places of performance that a keynote speaker doesn't, it's not really implied in keynote speaking. Keynote speaking seen from the absence of theater experience, you can kind of see a box in it that looks like the supposed behavior of a professional speaker. But once I got into the theater world and I was doing both at the same time, I could see like, wait a minute, I can be bigger. I can be bigger. I can be more fun when I step into the story. I can become the characters instead of just tell them about the characters. I can do a little stage plotting. I can know intentionally why I should stand here and how I should move to there and change my voice. So I get to be more of an entertainer as a speaker. That was one. I learned that as a keynote speaker, I can bring in some sound effects. I can bring in some visual cues, not so much lighting cues because of the corporate settings, but I can bring in a sound effect if I want. Like in theater, it depends on it. There's a soundtrack to my entire show. But in a dramatic portion of my keynote speaking, I can enhance that moment with some soundtrack. That's another one. It took me to go into speaking or into theater to learn the greatest performance secret I've ever learned that I take with me everywhere I go now. But I didn't learn it in corporate speaking, but now it's the number one thing I understand about any kind of being on stage and talking. And it's this, the greatest secret to being charismatic, whether you're in theater or in corporate, is to cultivate inner delight for what you're saying. So now I don't step on a stage without lighting my own inner delight for what I'm about to deliver. Whether that's serious material of stark consequences or humorous material and entertaining, I know that if I'm going to say something serious to an audience, I still have to be lit up with a delight to be the one to paint the picture. Another thing I learned in theater is that in theater, if my one-person show is made up of 45 scenes, what you learn in theater is that in every scene, you better know the emotion of that scene. You better have chosen one emotion that scene is meant to portray. So now I bring that into keynote speaking and I say, in this part of the keynote speaking, what emotion are you standing in? Because when you pick one, it's clear to the audience and the audience feels everything the speaker feels. So instead of not knowing as a keynote speaker, I don't know that I'm in an emotion. Aren't I just delivering knowledge and facts? And no, at every moment in your keynote speech, you're choosing what emotion you want the audience to feel and why. Take them on it. Like I'm really against vocal variety. I'm like, vocal variety is the worst advice ever. You want vocal variety? Then it just sounds, it's going to make you sound ridiculous and completely unnatural. Emotional variety. That's what you want. And emotional variety happens to drive vocal variety in a natural way.
With all that you've accomplished across the one-man show, the book, the keynote speeches, what's the next big ambition that you have?
I don't have big ambitions anymore. I have a desire to live my life every day present, peaceful, adventurous, and inspired, loving and kind. So that takes me into different adventures all the time. But ambition to me is driven to be successful. That's what ambitious means to me, driven to be successful so that I am significant or I am monetarily crushing it. And the me of today does not care about being significant or successful. I just want to be alive.
Is that thinking something that you've carried with you for a while or something that's a more recent development?
It's my last decade, the last decade of my life.
If you feel comfortable saying, what shifted?
Well, as every human hopefully does, at some point, you'll start to learn about the ego. But I started to see the difference between my ego and my soul. And I vastly prefer how my soul lives. If for me, life is two competing leaders in my being, and one is the ego and the other is the soul. And I learned at about 48 years old, the difference. And I've learned by experience that when I trust the leadership of my soul, I have the best life I've ever had. I am fulfilled with love, with joy, with passion, with adventure, with purpose, with meaning and peace, and most of all, peace. And the ego cannot deliver those things consistently. So that changed.
There's a lot of advice that goes around keynote circuits in the motivational speaking world. Is there any piece of advice that you don't resonate with?
A lot of it, Iain.
What stands out to you?
Iain, the advice that I don't resonate with is that when I look at the industry of keynote speaking, it goes in this order, my friend. Number one, I am vehemently opposed to keynote speakers that seem to do it for the money. I find that repulsive. I find keynote speaking to be one of the greatest honors possible to a human, to step on a stage and for 30 minutes or 60 minutes or 90 minutes or 2 hours to be granted a space of trust and authority to hopefully benefit and impact people's lives. And so the thought that someone might be stepping on that stage with a different intention, with the intention of how much money am I going to make out of this, is repulsive to the art form to me. But there's too much of that, and there's a lot of that. But that's okay, because there's a lot of us who aren't that way, who are into the purity of hopefully being a benefit to our audience. And maybe we have an artistry to it too. So we're self-fulfilled and self-paid by the art of creating a keynote speech and delivering a keynote speech. And yes, as a byproduct, we get a check afterwards. But when I see young keynote speakers being talked too much about how much money they can make in speaking, I wish that those young speakers could be redirected to think about how much impact they can make in keynote speaking. The second thing is that the industry of keynote speaking to me looks like a marketplace of boot camps for marketing your speeches. And these things will pluck $5,000, $10,000, $25,000 out of a person's pocket for a weekend of advice on how to market your talks. And yet I know from experience that the number one marketing tool, the number one thing for any speaker's career, isn't a marketing strategy. It's a great effing keynote. So I wish more attention was given to, do you want to go far in speaking? Then throw yourself with wild abandon into a great keynote. And what I have found is that most speakers don't know what a great keynote is. They've only had the viewpoint of a lot of really good keynotes. But the difference between a really good keynote and a great keynote is vast. It's almost like the Grand Canyon. But you know who does know the difference? Meeting planners. Meeting planners know the difference. So I always tell people the standard of a great keynote is not your audience saying, oh my God, that talk changed my life, because you can get that on day one. It's really easy to get that kind of feedback from an audience. Audiences are kind and they haven't been exposed to a lot of keynote speakers. But the day that you give keynotes, and every time you give one, chances are someone says, the meeting planner or someone in the audience says, we have to book you again. My friend has to book you. Now you know you're really getting a great keynote. And now your business is powered by word of mouth. And I had the benefit of a word of mouth career for 30 years in speaking. So I didn't have to go to speaker boot camps and learn 57 different ways to market your talk that are, quite frankly, not fun.
Who inspires you?
Tom Peters. Do you remember Tom Peters?
I don't. For our audience,
Tom was my original inspiration, because Tom, when I was 22 years old, Tom was the number one corporate speaker in the world, because he had co-written In Search of Excellence, the number one best-selling business leadership book in the world. And I got to see Tom speak once, and he was 6 hours of spit and fire and intelligence and boots on the ground anecdotes about business. So Tom really showed me the kind of corporate speaker I thought I would love to be someday. Carl Sagan was an original inspiration, because Carl Sagan was just a phenomenal communicator. Those two guys are legend in my mind.
Tom Peters, Carl Sagan. What about
Leo Buscaglia? Did you ever see Leo Buscaglia speak in the 70s?
Leo Buscaglia?
Yeah. The Doctor of Love from UCLA. Unbelievable anecdote teller, unbelievable storyteller, unbelievable in his unleashing humanity onto the room. I miss Leo Buscaglia.
What about non-speakers? They could be artists, philosophers.
I've had a lifelong obsession with Will Rogers. Will Rogers is the greatest communicator probably our country has ever seen. I mean, I'm surrounded by Will Rogers stuff on my desk right now. I'm writing a book on Will Rogers. Will was the most famous American this country has ever seen, and he dominated the 1920s and the 1930s by being a phenomenal communicator, a commentator, and a humorist, explaining the world to people on a daily basis, either as a comedian or on the radio or through a daily column or as a movie star.
You've given so much valuable advice in the last 20, 25 minutes. Is there any piece of advice that I've neglected to ask you to offer that you think would be very valuable for the folks listening now?
So we imagine the person listening wants to go into speaking, right?
Yeah.
I think speaking, my entire life has been made worth living, which is an understatement, because of the daring, bold, crazy choice I made to go into this art form. And I just want everybody listening to know, I think speaking is scary. I think it's daunting. I think that it's bold. I think to walk on stage and share your own thoughts, your own ideas, your own stories is to risk a lot. And so for anybody out there listening that says, yeah, but what do I do about my fear? What do I do about my failures when I go out and it doesn't work? I say, find a way to get through them. We all have, all of us, anybody that made a career out of it, found a way past their fears and found a way through their failures. None of us started good at it, and all of us were afraid. So I'd like people to know that's the territory to the greatest profession I can imagine.
Patrick, thank you so much. You've told us about this Will Rogers book that's going to come out. We know we can find you on patrickcombs.com. Any other places we should look for you? Any other projects we should support?
The only place where I'm active, where you can kind of see a current viewpoint of me, is my Instagram. And on Instagram, I'm Be Miracle Minded. I'm very personal. I'm not trying to make any points. I'm just sharing my life there. But that would be a good place. You can DM me there very easily.
Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom, Patrick.
Thank you, Dr. Iain.